And we continue with some interviews about finding a job in the UK.
In order to get a general overview of the phenomenon of Italians moving abroad, we talked to John Foote, a professor of Italian at the University of Bristol. We asked him about Italy's brain drain.
The real problem economically is that the jobs market doesn't allow quality to rise to the surface. And, huge numbers of very, very talented Italians are not in Italy. They're in London, they're in Berlin, they're in Paris. And there are 500,000 Italians in London now. And a lot of those people are the most talented people. They're in the universities, they're in the restaurants, they're in the design studios, the law studios. I know a lot of people who just were extremely talented and well educated, who couldn't get a look in. And that's the real problem. And that is to do with meritocracy. It's also to do with gerontocracy and the political system which is unable to reform itself, and the institutions like the universities which are completely run on a clientelistic way, which is, I see no hope of it changing. So all of those things mean that the best people often leave, and it isn't good for your country when the best people leave.
As an academic, John Foote says that university life in Britain is very different from that in Italy.
The opportunities are there, and I think they're very expensive, and it's expensive for Italians to live in England, but the opportunities afterwards are so much greater. I think that is an investment that many parents are willing to make. And you could see that all over. You just have to walk into a bar or a restaurant or an office in Bristol or London or Edinburgh, and you'll find Italians doing very high quality work, but also lower level work. And there's a whole range of things going on. And then there are Erasmus programs, which are extremely complicated and bureaucratic in Italy, but are very valuable and are very competitive because of the opportunities that they give. But they don't make it easy. Nothing is easy. In England, they're like lying down, doing it all for you. But in Italy, you have to do everything. Everything's a test, isn't it? Which I think is why they're so good often, the Italians, because they can do anything. If you give them a tiny bit of help, they're so independent. They don't need mollycoddling because they've been through, the school system, the university system, and they're so tough. Whereas the English are weak and lily-livered. Because we're so obsessed with student recruitment now. I mean, they ask us to meet and we rush out of the library and meet them now because they might give us a bad survey or something. It's the opposite, basically.
John Foote is also an acclaimed author who has written books about the history of Milan, of Italian football and of Italian cycling. We therefore asked him to compare today's Italian emigration with that of the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
It's a very different kind of immigration because this emigration is very much of the talented middle class. But that immigration was very much of the poor with middle class elements. It was a mass immigration. It was the peasantry leaving to go to New York or Venezuela or Bedford or south of France or Belgium to work in the mines. That kind of immigration of the working class, the peasantry, who had no jobs in Italy. This is a completely different type of thing. It's people with very high qualifications often who are blocked by this very restrictive labour market and by a kind of clientelistic approach to talent. And Italy doesn't have a peasantry anymore. It doesn't really have a working class anymore. You will find people on building sites and things who are Italian, but not really. People on building sites in London are Eastern European, Moroccan, Tunisian, that kind of thing. But Eastern European above all. You won't find Italians building houses, which you might have done 100 years ago.